use this microphone. Yeah, that'd be fine right there. Good evening. I hope you mothers are all full and satisfied with all that time with your kids today. Or maybe you're thinking, good riddance, now I get an evening by myself. I don't know. But hope that you had a great day. Although it's weird, and I saw Kathy back there. Appreciate Kathy being back there. Her mother dies sometime in the middle of our worship this morning on Mother's Day. It's got to be a strange thing. I've been thinking about that today. Hope you'll keep her and Twyla in your mind as well as we think about that in the days to come. We're in the book of Proverbs, so if you'll turn over the book of Proverbs, we'll be turning in different places. If you'll just kind of set it right there in Proverbs, you'll be pretty close to everything we want to talk about tonight. Kind of sticking with the mother theme or the family theme tonight. I went through the book of Proverbs and looked at what it has to say about family life and what it has to say to us about how we're supposed to conduct ourselves within the family if we look at it from God's point of view. The book of Proverbs considers the family to be central to everything. There's a mother and a father doing their best to raise their kids to be righteous before God and civic-minded, to make a contribution to their society. And we all know the significance of family because that's what colors everything we do. It's the basic founding block, elementary block of human life. We raise our kids within some context of family, and there's a variety of forms of this, but it's family, and everything we think or do comes out of that. So while politicians might avoid this a little bit, the real reason back behind so many social ills is the family. With so many people having children, but not raising them, that's what contributes to the problem that we see unleashed on society, this horde of young people who have not been socialized within the family to know how to conduct themselves. If you want to look at what the education problem is, it's this. So many kids without any family at all to support them back behind there. If you want to look at the economics of our culture, this is it. If you want to look at why there's so much hunger, this is it. And the economic crisis and the welfare crisis and so many other things, it's because the family has been disintegrated over the years. But you won't hear a politician addressing these things. The civic right of people, civil rights, the civic right of people to reproduce overrides the common sense responsibility of being able to raise them. So people are having kids, they're just not raising them. And then it's left to society to clean up the mess. Now, teachers can tell you this. Teachers can tell you there's a bunch of young people who get themselves up every morning, get themselves to school, go home, do their work themselves, and have very little of the guidance that a parent is supposed to give. The entire book of Proverbs is structured as a series of lessons on the wise man who's passing on to his children the things they need to know to be both right with God and also helpful to his society. And that's how you raise children properly. It's easy to assume that everybody's going to be on board with this, but we have so many situations that exist in the lives of people that you can no longer expect that this family language translates properly. You watch Modern Family and other TV shows, you can see the difficulty. Look in our own membership. They have several parents, single parents, that attend here, and the stress that they're under to raise their kids is enormous. Blended families trying to figure that out. There are singles who might sit at church sometimes wondering how this family language that we use can apply to them in some way, and what part they have to play in the church when we're so family-minded all the time. And that is an issue we need to address. And the number of grandparents raising their grandkids is amazing for whatever reason. How do we possibly give consideration to all these forms of family? To be respectful of them all without having all these but this and but that and but this, and having a long sermon the last 2 hours, and I have Bill Harris on my back all the time, right? The only answer I know is to present it the way Proverbs does and trust that you have the wisdom and insight to know how to translate that into these different settings that we're talking about. We can surely read what the proverb writer meant through the lens of whatever family system you're in and being aware that there's many like this. And there's a few pillars like this. Here's the first one. Young people growing up really need a mom and a dad available at home. Proverbs assumes that. If you look at Proverbs chapter 6, verse 20, it might be on the screen, I'm not sure. My son, keep your father's commandments and forsake not your mother's teaching. Mom and dad both have a voice. They both have a role to play in your lives, and you need to hear them both, because mom's got a unique perspective that dad doesn't have, and the kid needs both, and that son needs to be able to identify both with the father how to be a man and with the mother on how to treat a woman and how to respect a woman. Needs to see both in the same house. When you grow up with just one, there's a little bit of a deficiency. At least the proverb writer would assume that. Over and over again, mom and dad are offering instructions. Ron just read one of them a moment ago. They agree, mom and dad, on these matters of importance, and they present this united front in their teaching and their discipline. And mom and dad are not your best friend. They are not big buds. Mom and dad are not concerned about you liking them all the time. Mom and dad are instructing you, and they make it their responsibility to pass on to the next generation what they need to know to function in this world, and they have to tell them stuff that they may not like to hear, but mom and dad are going to tell you. And watching Facebook, and we have too many buddy parents. Your role is not to be their bud. It's to be their mom and dad. They got plenty of friends. They need an authority in their life called mom and dad. And the proverb writer says, keep talking. You keep talking and you keep telling them. And he's even given you a script of some stuff you need to be talking about. To disrespect either the mother or the father is an affront to the other and to God, and it's totally irresponsible to disregard either of your parents. It's a form of self-harm in Proverbs. If you don't listen, it's going to come back and hurt you. So your best interest is to listen to mom and dad. And that simple device of using the voice of mom and dad together is offensive today. Proverbs would declare this. I feel comfortable speaking for Solomon here when he would say, you don't need two mamas, you don't need two daddies, you need one of each. You need to be able to identify with the gender of your same, and you need to be able to understand the gender of the other. And you need both of them in your house. This thing that we see today, it's okay for two dads to adopt or two moms to adopt. It might be okay legally, but it's not helpful to the kids. They both need to be able to identify with the same gender and the opposite gender in the same house. To ignore that message would be harmful. And even children's homes has come under the pressure of caving in and letting homosexual people adopt or foster. The only problem I see with this, and stressing this too harshly, is because you do have the single parent homes. And there's nothing that can be done about that, and they would lament that as much as anyone. So don't press too hard on this to where you make people feel unnecessarily guilty when they are a single parent doing the best that they can. And I'm exhausted to think about what those parents feel like at the end of a normal day. I have no idea. But even you would say, yes, the ideal would be to have one of each. But to the Bible interpreter, please understand the ideal is rare to be found. When I'm eating with Abby in 4th grade, and across the table from her is this kid, I'm eating with her, we're eating together, this kid looks at me and says, so which one are you? And I sit there and I go, what? Which one are you? I said, I'm her dad. Yes, which one? Finally, as I talk to him, he's got 4 dads. He's had a string of 4 dads. Which one are you? That's the lens that kids are actually absorbing life through. I can't imagine that. But that's the world we live in. But the proverb writer wants to present as an ideal an option as possible, and saying mom's voice, dad's voice needs to be heard. A second message we need to hear is that they need to do their job. They've got a job to do. Remember, they are not best friends. They've got a task to do. God has assigned you dads to be dads, and assigned you moms to be moms, and there's certain roles that go along with this. First one I would say is this: discipline. Discipline those kids for the sake of your child, for the sake of your own sanity, for the sake of this world, for the sake of school teachers, for the sake of law officers, for the sake of their spouse that they'll marry one of these days, and for the sake of their employers who they'll seek to go to one day for a job. Listen to these passages about discipline. Proverbs 29, I don't know if these are on the screen. I can't see them from there, but the rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. Just leave them. Just let them raise themselves. And if you'll listen to the news, it's like, well, my 3-year-old decided their gender was wrong. They want a gender change. We're going to let them. 3 years old. They don't know what to think at 3 years old, and they need someone to channel and direct them into the way they should go. Your job is not let the kids rule the house. You are in charge of your house. Lead them in the way they should go. I'm not for not respecting kids, but I'm going to tell you, you know what kids are? Kids are adults who haven't grown up yet, and they need someone to give them guidance, and so discipline them. And I don't think we're supposed to take this rod as just corporal punishment all the time. I think maybe people looked at Proverbs, spoil the rod, spare the rod, spoil the child. It's not actually said that way, but that's what they quoted. And we need to beat our kids all the time. Well, that's not what the proverb writer is saying. You need to exert whatever pressure you need to make them do the things that they should be doing. Sometimes you have kids who need that physical spanking approach. And anybody who says that's crazy, just go to Walmart for a day and tell me I'm not right. But that's not the only, and it shouldn't be your primary, and it probably shouldn't be your first option. There are many other options you can take before then. And there are some kids you can only drive evil out of them with a belt. You kind of loosen up the earwax by heating up their rear ends. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of what it needs for them. But there are also a lot of young people that isn't effective with, and if you sit them down and talk to them and tell them your disappointment, it will crush them and it will do everything necessary to change them. And that depends on the heart of your kid. But whatever you do, you must do something. And I got to tell you this, when we had Noah in 1998, and he was 3 or 4 years old and he was acting up or something, and I thought, somebody needs to tell that kid what he needs to do right. And I sit there and thought, hold it. That person's me. Do you know he was 4 years old before I realized if he's going to straighten up, I'm going to have to intervene? I mean, you're sitting there thinking, well, it's just a sweet little kid, he can do everything. No, they're not sweet kids. They're rotten brats, y'all. I don't care how cute they are. Somebody has got to intervene here and get them in a direction they're supposed to go. And the Proverbs writer says, you got to discipline. Here's another one. Discipline your son and he will give you rest. He will give you delight to your heart. When you raise a kid who then becomes self-disciplined, they cannot say no to themselves if nobody's ever said no to them before. If you want a kid who can say no to himself in this thing so that he can accomplish something greater, then you need to let him learn what no means right now. And it might be cute when they're 1, but it ain't cute anymore when they're 3 and 4 doing that childish stuff. I'm not the expert. That's why I'm quoting Proverbs and not Spencer. See? Proverbs 19:18. Discipline your son, for there is hope. Do not set your heart on putting him to death. Don't just let him go to death. He's saying, and this proverb writer says, you don't intervene, he's going to go straight down the death chamber. And you've got to, as a parent, intervene and take him down the road of life rather than the road of death. Proverbs 23:13. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. Don't worry, you ain't going to kill him. That's what he's saying. If you strike him with a rod, he will save his soul. You will save his soul from Sheol. Again, I'm not talking about abuse. I'm talking about some structured, principled, controlled force sometimes. That's not the only option. I think the proverb writer says it needs to be an option on the table. Discipline. Moms and dads, you've got to do it, and don't wait for grandma to do it. Don't wait for grandpa to do it. The job is yours. Second thing that a parent needs to do, his job is teaching. And really this entire book is about this. The entire book of Proverbs is mom and dad talking to the young person, saying, I want to prepare you for life. Let me tell you about the red light district in town. It talks about that. And those of you older know what I'm talking about. And the young people are like, what? No, there's places you shouldn't go. Moms and dads, you need to tell them that. You need to tell them what sexual attraction before marriage feels like. They may look at you and say, don't talk that way because I can't picture you ever doing that. I know you can't. I'm going to gross you out and I'm going to make you cringe. But we're going to talk about this because this is life. And the book of Proverbs opens up every avenue you can imagine. What do you do with your anger? How do you spend your money? What about when I just want to sleep in? It's in there. Well, there's a lion in the road. I can't go to work today. Baloney, son. Get out of bed and go. Greet your neighbor, but don't yell too loud in the morning. This stuff needs to be talked about in your house. They need to hear it from you. And finally, there's training, and this is kind of different. You talk about training or you talk about teaching, it may be the same thing. It's a little bit different. We know this verse, Proverbs 22, verse 6, but I want to deal with it for a couple of reasons. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. What is the difference between training and teaching? And I would say it this way. It's kind of an on-the-job training thing that you are demonstrating for them how to live. Right now, we've got Abby with this certain kind of license where she has to have a licensed driver with her. And I've noticed I've got to be really careful because she knows all the book stuff. And so every time I forget to turn a blinker on, Dad, you forgot to turn the blinker. One of you have to pick her up on the side of the road. If you see Abby on the side of the highway, would you please pick her up and bring her home? I'm going to drop her off there one day because we're training. The whole idea is I'm showing her how she should drive. I'm not just telling her. I'm not just instructing her, here, watch this video. We are in the car driving, and you are in life. And that's why even the Deuteronomy writer says this, Moses. When you're walking to the market, when you're walking in the evening, when you're sitting down watching, that's when you teach. You teach in real life on-the-job training with your kids. Find those teachable moments. And don't just say, don't tell them, you say yes, sir, no, sir. If you want them to say that, guess what? You need to say that. Well, that's what training means. Now, there are going to be people, a couple of things about this. A lot of people have been beaten over the head all these years by this verse. See, you must not have trained them right. Because when they got older, they veered from it. This is not like Ephesians. This is not like another part of Scripture that is always, forever, universally true. The Proverbs are general statements about life that generally turn out this way, but they do not always. So if you raised up 5 children in the way they should go, and 4 of them follow it, but one of them veers off, it's not because that for some reason you were deficient in them. They still have free will. Do not abuse this book and this particular verse by beating parents over the head saying you didn't do a good enough job. Our kids have free will, and they can choose against you. And if you don't believe that's true, you need to watch life a little closer. Even your own kids will do things that totally perplex you. Is there an amen here? You got to be kidding me. Okay, there you go. See, I told you. The other thing about Proverbs 22:6, some people interpret this way. Train up a child in the way this child should go. This child is not any child. This child you know. He's got or she's got bents that are weird. If you are forcing your kid to be a baseball star and a baseball star is not in him, you are abusing him. Do not live your childhood through your kids unless they're very much like you. Train up a child in the way this child should go. My brother was wild, rambunctious, obnoxious, and crazy, and he'd bump against walls, and he loved wrestling. I hated wrestling. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I was kind of one of these kids, didn't like to get dirty, that kind of weird sort of thing. I don't know why I'm that way, but it's not my fault. God made me that way. And so as I think about, so you should train. We tried putting Noah in baseball, and after getting hit and not hitting and hating it, griping about it, and obviously he had absolutely no talent in it, it hit us that maybe this is not the thing for him. Maybe computers are the thing for him, and apparently that's right. Don't make your kids do things that they don't need to be doing. That could be a lesson from here, but only a parent will know that sometimes. These are your tasks. These are your tasks. So first of all, needs a mom and a dad at home. Second of all, needs mom and dad to do their job. Third, children need to be taught to respect their parents. I put respect there because respect ends up doing two things. In the early years, respect is obedience. Listen to what they say and do what they tell you. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It's supposed that children don't know things like parents know things, and so the parents, when they speak, the kids should listen and follow the instruction. And if you will, it will serve you well all your life. Proper obedience will mean certain things. It means, Proverbs 28, you won't rob your parents. It means you won't curse your parents, chapter 20, verse 20. You will not mock them, and if you mock your parents, even to your friends, be very careful. The Lord is watching. Do you know what the first commandment with a promise is? Children, obey your parents. It's the first commandment outside of the commandments that regulate our relationship with God. He starts turning his attention toward us, and command number one is really, really, really honor those who are the most functioning as a role toward making you see God. God is pretty serious about the way you respect your parents. Don't scorn them, Proverbs 30:17. Don't grieve them, chapter 17, verse 31. Don't embitter them. Don't drive them out. Okay. I don't know what age this changes. There's like that age of accountability thing about when young people need to be baptized that kind of fluctuates. In the early years, respect is obedience. So when do I no longer have to obey my parents? When you do the second thing. When you start to honor them. No longer do you have to obey them. I mean, I don't know what age that is. I do not have to obey my parents now. And yet, if I ever make a major decision, you can bet I'm calling them because I want to. Because I want their advice on this. You will no longer have to obey your parents when what you're wanting to do is make decisions that reflect a respect for them and that makes you want to honor them and makes you want to do things that when people watch your life, they say, ooh, what good parents you must have. See, I'm going to train you. My parents are going to come here together one of these days, and I'm training you. What I want you to do is I want you all to meet them and say, wow, you've got a good kid. You must have done a good job. That's what I'm going to train you to do. And I'll give you a week's notice. That's not for me. That thrills them to death. My job in life is whatever I do in raising my kids or whatever I do in ministry or whatever, one of them is this. I want it to reflect well on some incredible parents that I want to honor for the rest of my life. I do not have to do what they say anymore. I just want to make sure that what I do reflects well on them. That's when you no longer have to obey. And I don't know when that is. Now, this last thing, there's just one last category I would put on here. I'd hope some of our young people would take down a pen, but I don't think they use pens anymore, but get out their phones. We need to equip our kids to find a faithful mate for themselves. Let me go back, next screen, I think there's a proverb on here. I want to show you a couple of these. Okay, Proverbs 23. These are about your parents as you grow older, and here's one. The father of the righteous will greatly rejoice. He who fathers a wise son will be glad in him. Let your father and mother be glad. Let her who bore you rejoice. You want it to be like on Mother's Day. Okay, it's a great day to honor her, but you know what? What she really wants is you to live a life of honor that reflects on her. And that's what Proverbs 23 is about. Proverbs 17, verse 6. Grandchildren are the crown of the aged, and the glory of children is their fathers. I think a son needs to hear his dad say to him, I am so proud of you. And if that child doesn't hear that, he will live in pursuit of that for the rest of his life. And dads, if you just say, well, I'm just not that verbal, learn verbal. They need to hear it from you. But Proverbs also says the dad needs to hear the son look at that father and say, I'm proud of you, Dad. Proverbs 27:11. Be wise, my son, and make my heart glad, that I may answer him who reproaches me. As you get older and anybody comes up and say, what kind of life did you live? What kind of person were you? The old man looks at the son, points to that picture on the counter over there. That's my argument for living a good life. If we as men go and conquer the world and become president of the United States, but we are lousy dads, we're going to go to our grave in misery. Is that true? All right, the last thing, who you should marry. Proverbs reveals that finding a mate is a godly thing, right? Is a blessing from God. And you want to find a godly, faithful spouse to marry one of these days. And so he spends some time talking about this in the book of Proverbs. Not only are the parents trying to raise this child, they're showing this child the kind of person they not only need to be, but the kind of person they need to look for. So the decision to who to marry is, I think, the second most important decision you'll make in your life. The first is, I've chosen to live for God. And the second one is, I've chosen this woman who's going to help me, or this man who's going to help me live for God, your spouse. Proverbs 18:22. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. Now, there's some things, and I want you to be ready to turn to these because I didn't want to put them on the screen. I didn't have the guts. Proverbs 19. And I want to hear some amens from anybody who's got the courage to say them. Not yet. A foolish son, Proverbs 19:13. A foolish son is a ruin to his father, and a wife's quarreling is a continual dripping of rain. There's somebody who's going to sleep in a spare room tonight. Proverbs 25:24. It is better to live in the corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife. This is getting bad. No amens necessary on this one. A continual dripping on a rainy day and a quarrelsome wife are alike. I think that's fun. This is an Arab proverb. You ready? 3 things make a house intolerable: a leaking through of rain, a wife's nagging, and bed bugs. That's the 3 the Arabs say. Make sure she's not ill-tempered. Make sure she's prudent. That's 21:19 and 19:14. But here's what I want to do. I want to give you a list. And this is what you need to train your kids with, this checklist. This is what they need to look for. And I'm thinking about Abby here, and I'm thinking, okay, he's going to be tall, dark, and handsome. I get all that. You got to have that attraction. I get all that. But don't be so enamored with the looks that you forget to do your homework on this person. After you've done counseling with that no-count guy who won't get off the couch and get a job, you don't know the misery you could get into by marrying a good-looking guy who has no work ethic. You don't know what that's like, and I've seen that, and it would drive me crazy. So here are the questions. Does he or she have a hearty work ethic? You say, how can you know this like in college? You can know it in college. How seriously do they take their work? And if they have a job, do they do it well? Are they sloppy? Are they lazy? Do they show up on time? Don't tell me this doesn't matter. And don't say, well, I can overlook that and I can change him. You will not change him. Do I have an amen from ladies there? You're not going to change him. You're not going to change him. That old story about this woman, she's about to get married, and to keep her from getting nervous, they had focus on the aisle. Okay, number 1, focus on the altar. All right, focus on him. She said, okay, aisle, altar, him. I doubt it. Get it? Aisle, altar, him. Sunday night crowd after Mother's Day. Does he or she have a good work ethic? Number 2, does he or she handle money wisely? Guys, if that girl is given everything she ever imagines by her parents, never has to work for a thing, she's going to marry a guy who's going to fund that lifestyle, and you're going to have to work your finger to the bone to give her everything she wants. Do not fall for that. Proverbs would tell you that. Does he or she handle time wisely? If he's playing video games 23 hours a day, how in the world, first of all, did you meet him? I don't... And we laugh about that, but with social media now, this is an issue. People sit in front of screens forever. How does he handle his time? Does he do his homework? Does she even just live? 4, does he or she worship God faithfully? If she skips every other week, you better know after you get married, it might be once a month. I'm just telling you. If they're not going all the time before you, they won't go all the time with you. Now that changes sometimes. I know some people it has. And I know a lot of people are going to come up to me and say, I was an unbeliever, I got married, and I believe in marriage evangelism. Well, I know it's happened. But if you want to risk it, do it go for it. I'm telling you. Does he or she worship God faithfully? Does he or she recognize the needs of others and provide help when possible? I was in this amazing story, and in the middle of church, the gospel meeting in Des Moines, Iowa, Grandview Church of Christ, there was this young lady who'd just been converted. She lived in Nashville, and now she was going to the University of Iowa. She was on the volleyball team. She was a starter on the volleyball team, and she was going to this little church, only been a Christian for a year. I'm going to tell this again sometime, but I just got to tell it right now because this impressed me so much. And here she is away from home, a new Christian. She sought out this small church. It's the biggest church in Iowa, but it's a small church. And she got to know these people. She did all the instigating of this. And there was a call that went out, an email that went out and said they just had a family, that this lady just had twins. And for the next week, the church was going to provide meals for this family. She had never made a meal in her life, but she knew the family and she wanted to do something. So she calls a widow in the church. And she says to this widow on the phone, this freshman in college, away from home, brand new Christian, calls this widow and says, if you tell me the ingredients, I'll get them. If I come to your house, will you show me how I can put a meal together and take it to this family? I nearly fainted. And that night at church, I said, are you here? I said, would you marry my son? You show me somebody like that who thinks of others, there's somebody impressive to you. Now, here's another one. Does he or she act out of wisdom and make good choices? We're not talking about you never make a bad choice. Everybody makes a bad choice. But the series of choices, when people make constant bad choices, it's kind of an idea that they kind of impulsive, off-the-cuff decision makers. What kind of decisions do they make? Does he or she, get this one, does he or she respect authority? How does he talk about his parents to you? If right now in college they don't care about what the teacher says, they don't care about what the rules are, they're breaking rules all the time, and they're talking bad about their parents, run from him as fast as you can. Need to respect authority. And finally, what do the people who know them best, him or her best, say about them? Talk to some people. See what their track record would. And if they say, are you stalking me? Say, yes, I am. Yes, I am. Family is crucial. Everything you are is rooted in family, either the one that you were raised in or the one that you married into. Family is central to everything for us. It only makes sense to put a lot of prayerful thought into our families. As parents, the Proverbs urge us, instruct, train, discipline, raise your kids with a goal in mind of them being responsible adults. They are not your best friends, and you're not just trying to get them by. You're wanting them to be responsible adults. As young people, soak up all the training that you can, the words your parents say, the way that they live that you respect and admire. Soak that in as much as you can. As teens and young adults, keep this material in mind when you're trying to identify a person to be close friends, and then identify that person who will be the person with whom you start your own family. And then use this material to pass it on to the next generation. And if you are, Lord willing, are blessed with kids, you take your role as parent and teach them like your parents did you as a kid. That is God's wisdom for the family. If you're not a believer and this evening, for whatever reason, the events of this day have convicted you, and you need to respond, you need to confess, you need to become a believer, now's the time to do it as we stand and sing to encourage you.